That's nice, that's McDermott, and that's a goal! Oh yes! Neil against tonight. Liverpool, who've won it in the same season as they've won the championship.
Bill Shankly built the club so they could compete and be successful. Under Bob Paisley they conquered all of Europe and didn't want to stop. This is the story of football's greatest managerial transition, Shankly to Paisley, and the most successful time of any English club. Bob Paisley, like his Liverpool predecessor, was birthed into a mining community but began bricklaying. Also, like Bill Shankly, he got his big break out of his community via football, and after moving from local outfit Bishop Auckland to Liverpool at the end of the 1930s, was due to make a name for himself. Then, World War II hit. Paisley, restricted to just 2 reserve matches before the conflicts halted all football, finally got his moment in the sport in the 1946-47 campaign when Liverpool were crowned champions of England. Sadly, the eventual manager's playing career would become more famous for a decision made by Liverpool manager George Kay ahead of the 1950 FA Cup final with Arsenal. There, the championship-winning coach dropped Paisley for the biggest game of his career, and it never really recovered from there. Paisley survived through the Don Welsh years, but upon Liverpool's relegation in 1954, he knew his career was done. He was 35 years of age, and that wasn't the time to be introduced to the second division, so he quit, contemplating a return home to sell fruit and veg, or even opening up a newsagent's. Ultimately, a small course in physiotherapy that he took during his playing career saved him, as that was the qualification needed to give him a role on the Liverpool staff after his playing time had ended. He took on the reserves and rose through the ranks to ultimately become the new manager, Bill Shankly's number 2, just in time for Liverpool's rise through the ranks of both English and European football. Even though he was Shankly's closest confidant, Paisley was stunned like everybody else by the retirement of his boss. What would the club do next? Paisley stated, "I never applied for the job, I wouldn't have applied for the job. He didn't need to anyway. The football club decided that he would be handed the job of succeeded Bill Shankly." The club though had reservations, earmarked by Kevin Keegan in a later remark when he stated they were not sure whether Bob could do the job. He was a good number 2, but he wasn't very good communication wise. What he did have though was a solid foundation gifted to him by Shankly, which he was never going to change, and thanks to their most recent European Cup exit in November 1973 to Red Star Belgrade, the club had a blueprint on how to go about things when it returned to the European Cup, and they would return. Outside of that, things kept ticking along as usual. Players like Phil Neal and Ray Kennedy were signed by the club, and Paisley showed he had just as much tactical nous as his predecessor in shifting the latter from a centre forward to left midfield. Also, Phil Thompson was in from the reserves alongside Jimmy Case and David Fairclough, and thanks to Liverpool's evolution to using ball-playing centre-halves, Thompson would be moved back into defence, signalling the end of Larry Lloyd in the heart of the backline. After a trophyless season, Paisley inadvertently pulled the plug on Shankly's official association with Liverpool after his predecessor continued to skulk around Melwood. Noticing patterns between Liverpool and their great rivals Man United after their retirement of foundational manager Matt Busby, Paisley needed breathing room. He didn't just expect the club to cut all ties with Shankly though. Whether it helped or it didn't, Bob Paisley would never have to endure another trophyless season at Anfield. Whilst Liverpool were humbled to Ferencvaros in yet another early round defeat in Europe via the Cup Winners' Cup, Paisley wouldn't give Europe the same satisfaction in the UEFA Cup in the 1975-76 season. Hibs were able to beat the Reds at home in the first round's first leg, but from then on in, Liverpool simply did not lose in the competition. Toshak bagged himself a hat-trick in the second leg, whilst the thrashings doled out to Real Sociedad in the second round proved somewhat of a turning point in the competition. From there, Paisley's side went out to Wrocław and Dresden and won relatively handsomely, as they were paired off with the best remaining team in the competition in the semi-final, Barcelona. Meanwhile, Liverpool had bounced back from their opening day of the league season humbling at QPR. Whilst nobody knew it at the time, Liverpool had already gotten their fiercest league game out of the way, as QPR would be the surprise package that ran the Reds all the way in the league. However, the tandem of Toshak and Keegan proved way too powerful for the Londoners in the league. Whilst Manchester United dropped out of the race in the spring upon their return to the top flight, QPR kept going and Liverpool needed every ounce of effort to get over the line. The period of late March and early April described this more than any other. Across 5 league games, Liverpool kept the defence impenetrable and relied on scuffs and nicks such as a late Phil Neal penalty at Birmingham and a second half winner at home to Leicester. In between were 3 wins solely won by the goals of David Fairclough, or Super Sub as he was known and didn't want to be known as. A late goal sunk Norwich at Carragher Road before one either side of the break beat Burnley in front of the Kop. Easily the most satisfying, however, was the 88th minute winner in the Merseyside derby on April the 3rd. Meanwhile in Spain, John Toshak's sole strike provided the away goal in yet another tentative 1-goal clean-sheeted win in the Camp Nou. Then it was left to Phil Thompson to score a crucial goal in a 1-1 draw in the home second leg. Whilst it ended a run of 6 matches without conceding, the 2-1 aggregate win spurred Liverpool on for greatness. 2 further wins in the league against Manchester City and Aston Villa were necessary as QPR beat Leeds to go a point above Liverpool ahead of their final day visit of Molineux on May the 4th. The match had been postponed because of Wales' surprise participation in the Euro 76 quarter-finals. Before then, Liverpool had the first leg of a UEFA Cup final to host against Club Brugge. It had started disastrously as the Belgians had taken control of the game and ran up a 2-goal lead inside of 15 minutes. With the hour mark appearing quick on the horizon, Liverpool finally churned through the gears.
Bringing in Kennedy. Great goal! Keegan turning brilliantly. Kennedy again. And Case. And Keegan comes up now.
With the slender 3-2 advantage to take to Belgium, Liverpool had a league title to win. They had history of winning the league on the final day at Molineux, the days of 1947 and a battle between first and second when Albert Stubbins scored the crucial goal and a certain Bob Paisley was part of the Liverpool ranks. This time Wolves had nothing to play for, so were free to do as they pleased. It released their inhibitions as they went ahead early on. Liverpool needed both points to win the league and the half-time mark passed, so too the hour mark. Then, with 14 minutes left, the Reds struck through Keegan, Toshak and Ray Kennedy. 3-1 winners, Paisley had his first piece of silverware. His second wouldn't be too far away as Liverpool jetted off to Bruges.
And Dresden, but it's Harbour to take it. Who's trying to invent something and organise something? Can't squat erect. Keegan! He's done it! That tore its way through, and the whistle goes, and Liverpool win the UEFA Cup.
Bill Shankly had done the league and UEFA Cup double in 1973. Now Paisley had emulated him, and not only that, Paisley had taken Liverpool back to their perch. They were now sat alone on 9 league titles ahead of Arsenal's tally of 8, whilst both Everton and Manchester United languished behind on 7, with Aston Villa and Sunderland increasingly becoming specks in the rearview mirror on 6 apiece. Liverpool never stood still in the transfer market, and that was true in '76. Ray Wilkins was considered for the pivotal midfield role until Terry McDermott's pre-season convinced Paisley otherwise. Regardless, the club parted with £200,000 to bring David Johnson to the front line. Preparations for the new season were hit, however, in advance of the Charity Shield against Southampton when Kevin Keegan announced that the campaign would be his last for Liverpool. He would depart for Europe the following summer. The European Cup, though, was there to be won in the meantime. You never could quite predict a European campaign, as proven by Liverpool drawing Northern Irish team Crusaders and getting special dispensation to arrive at the airport only 2 hours before a 5-0 second leg away win. Then, more predictably, shoddy officiating cost the Reds in Turkey, losing 1-0 in the last 16 first leg away to Trabzonspor. Within 90 minutes of the home tie back at Anfield, though, Liverpool had run up their 3 goals and cruised into their springtime portion of the competition. Saint-Etienne in the quarter-finals, however, was a different brine kettle of fish. After a 1-0 defeat in France against one of the premier teams on the continent and European Cup finalists the prior summer, Liverpool needed something special in front of the Kop. They got it in one of Anfield's greatest ever nights.
Atmosphere here tonight, matching the wall of noise which surrounded the players at Shankly and Carragher. Keegan. Djokovic has missed it! After a nice shot, slow again, goes in! Neil and Koshek going after it. Kennedy, 2-2! And Fairclough is onside. This now could be interesting. Fairclough! Super sub! Once again! All over! Liverpool have won!
All wasn't rosy in the Anfield Garden, however, as Phil Thompson's season-ending injury left him out for the remainder of the campaign, and it left Tommy Smith left to shoulder the rest of his penultimate campaign in the thick of the trenches. And Liverpool were really hunting down a season for the ages come the spring of '77. First off, FC's Europe were a comparative breeze in the semi-finals in Europe as the Reds won 6-1 on aggregate. Then Everton proved a much tougher nut to crack in the FA Cup semi-final, the Toffees needing a replay to be chowed down after a 3-0 defeat at Main Road. A week beyond that, the title was all but confirmed thanks to Kevin Keegan's first half winner at home to Manchester United, the team that would be waiting for the Reds at Wembley. 4 points of difference in the league between Liverpool and Manchester City with 4 matches to play. Liverpool could afford to not win for the remainder of their campaign. They went to QPR and got a point, but their advantage didn't waver. They went to Highfield Road and got a draw off Coventry, and their advantage still didn't waver. It meant that one more point in their final home game against West Ham would do it. Another goalless stalemate was just fine with the Kop. Paisley had won the league again, and Ian Callaghan had tied Cliff Bastin's record of 5 English titles. It left Liverpool just 2 more games away from immortality and the treble. All wasn't well in the build-up to the FA Cup final, with Manchester United at Wembley, however, thanks to the FA and their nonsensical timeline that placed a would-be replay on June the 27th. That insane idea left Paisley in a conundrum. Stick to what the team knew or go for the jugular. He went for the latter, opting for David Johnson in a 3-man front line, sacrificing Ian Callaghan as a result.
As Jimmy Greenhoff's header on for Pearson. A chance on here. And Pearson is the scorer. Case. Good turn. Oh yes. On by Macari. Slips slightly. Jimmy Greenhoff. And is it got in by Macari, is it?
It didn't work. The treble dreams were in tatters, and that particular peak was reserved for a certain other club 22 years later. One peak they could scale before any other English club, though, was to match a league title with a European Cup in the same season. Again, preparations weren't perfect. 1. Ray Kennedy had a 5 problem. 2. Summer signing from Wrexham Joey Jones was carrying a knock. 3. Kevin Keegan was more busy in London, finalising a £500,000 deal to Hamburg. 4. John Toshak had only returned to training and then went and did his Achilles, ruling him out of the contest. In the starting 11, 2 survivors from the club's first crack at the European Cup 12 years prior, Tommy Smith and Ian Callaghan. The stage was set, Borussia Mönchengladbach in a city that Bob Paisley hadn't been in since he was in charge of an army truck in 1944. Rome.
That's nice. That's McDermott, and that's a goal. That's a mistake, and here's Simonsen. And that's it. Oh yes. Neil against tonight. Liverpool, who've won it in the same season as they've won the championship.
Bob Paisley called it the best performance the club had ever seen, and just where would they go from the very top of the mountain? The first thing to think about was the Kevin Keegan succession plan, quickly accomplished when just £440,000 was needed to get Kenny Dalglish from Celtic. It meant that Liverpool got out of that tricky situation with more money than what they entered with, and arguably a better player. Then Alan Hansen was added to the backline from Partick Thistle for just $100,000, whilst Graham Souness would be the belated third name through the door midway through the campaign, with half an eye to succeeding Ian Callaghan. I'll wager that's just about as good as any transfer business ever achieved in a single season. 2 legends replaced 3 even bigger names, replacing them. Bob Paisley absolutely was not standing still in the wake of the club's finest achievement. But that didn't mean that they didn't come undone in the subsequent season. One, newly promoted Nottingham Forest, managed by that same pesky Brian Clough that pipped them to the title in 1972. He rocked up and not only beat them to the league, but went toe-to-toe with them in the League Cup final too.
Forest, a very controversial penalty. John O'Hare seemed on the edge of the box when he was tripped by Phil Thompson after 54 minutes, but Pat Partridge, the FIFA World Cup referee who goes to Argentina, awarded a spot kick and John Robertson scored.
It wouldn't be the last time Liverpool were left smarting by refereeing decisions in a contest with Nottingham Forest. The Reds were safe in Europe though, where Clough and Forest couldn't get to them. Not yet. They proved untouchable on the continent once again, destroying Kevin Keegan's new Hamburg club 7-1 on aggregate in the Super Cup before swiftly eliminating both Dinamo Dresden and Benfica after a kind bye beyond the first round. And whilst Gladbach got the smallest slivers of revenge in Germany, David Johnson had packed away a late away goal in Liverpool's luggage which set them up perfectly for the second leg. In front of the Kop, a 3-0 triumph was inevitable, and it booked another European Cup final, this time with an all too familiar foe, Club Brugge.
Nicely, and the cover was there, but so is Sounders there. Will he get a shot in? Now Dalglish.
If the first European Cup triumph was a Liverpool success, the second one was definitively a Paisley one. After all, only Ray Clements, Phil Thompson and Emlyn Hughes had started both Shankly's final match and the club's second European Cup triumph 4 years on. A second European Cup triumph which definitively put Liverpool on a perch as the most successful English, no British, club in Europe. Ajax had won the European Cup 3 times in a row. Bayern Munich had done it 3 times in a row as well, so it just made sense that Liverpool would join them in winning the same competition for a third consecutive year to close out the 1970s. Well, just guess who pitched up to meet them in the first round.
Cuts through on his own. The pace and confidence to do it. Not a bad looking cross. Woodcock. And a superb goal from Barrett.
Liverpool roared back, don't worry. Alan Kennedy was brought in from Newcastle and would displace Joey Jones at left back, whilst the long earmarked retirements of Ian Carragher and Tommy Smith were confirmed in the summer of '78. With yet more changes, Liverpool didn't feel a bit of it as they won the league title at a canter in comfortably the domestic pinnacle of Bob Paisley at Anfield. Not only did they destroy a record set by Don Revie's Leeds with 68 points, but they rattled through their opponents at will in achieving the joint best goal difference in English football history. 7-0 against Spurs, 5-0 against Derby, unbeaten against Forest in the league, 6 past Norwich, 3 past both Leeds and Man United. It was as if they were angry, riled up by Clough and his win in Europe, and this was Liverpool saying they would not take that fact lying down. They'd won the big one twice, as Bill Shankly desired earlier in the decade, and they had shaken the flash in the pan known as Nottingham Forest to return to their league throne. All that was left was to get back into the European Cup and go and win it all over again. Things though had to change both on and off the pitch. Ahead of the 1979-80 season, with a new decade of glamour on the horizon, Liverpool were at the forefront of the English game in more ways than one. Not only were they the country's record European Cup winners and league winners, but they were the first to adopt a front-of-shirt sponsor. The club didn't want to become overly commercial, but this one had become a necessity. Hitachi's name was splayed across the front of Liverpool shirts because their £2.4 million worth of revenues in the prior season equated to just £71,000 worth of profit. Whilst the Bob Paisley team would never quite match the peak that they had reached in the league in 1979, Liverpool didn't need to be completely imperious to retain their crown, which was effectively won courtesy of an unbeaten streak of form that built up to Christmas 1979. With Boxing Day came the cherry on the cake, a triumph over Manchester United that split Liverpool from their nearest and dearest rivals come the end of the campaign. Liverpool went top that day and never relinquished that status. But unfortunately the league was only distracting comfort from their other activities. After all, winning the league was the least Liverpool could do after they bombed out of both the domestic cup semi-finals, thwarting a spectacular first ever domestic treble. First typically to Nottingham Forest, of course, in the League Cup before it took 4 matches to send Arsenal through in a whistle-stop tour of the longest FA Cup semi-final that sent both sides around the country to Sheffield, Birmingham and Coventry to decide who would surprisingly lose to second-tier outfit West Ham. There wasn't even any joy to be had upon their European Cup return as they fell at the first hurdle again, this time to the archetypal crack Eastern European outfit Dynamo Tbilisi, who won 3-0 behind the Iron Curtain in ravenous fashion. It was clear that further retooling had to be done by Bob Paisley. Ian Rush was signed for Chester, earmarked for the future, so too Bruce Grobbelaar, who was acquired midway through the season, with an eye on replacing Ray Clements come the end of the campaign. Of all players, it was Terry McDermott leading the way in the scoring ranks with 22 strikes from midfield. Liverpool, though, found themselves officially languishing in 5th place after way too many draws. The club's safety net midway through the season could be found both in their European Cup run and also the League Cup, which was finally won. In fact, let's get this out of the way now. Here's Liverpool dominating the League Cup under Bob Paisley, the kind of run that made Pep Guardiola and Jose Mourinho perk up somewhere in the Iberian Peninsula.
More towards Hansen, and the goal by Clements, but it's not away yet. Rush 3-1 up those familiar steps to get today not 1 trophy but 2.
And again, Wheelan's scored it! Brilliant goal! Liverpool have won the Milk Cup competition for the 3rd year running.
And whilst Everton eliminated them from the 4th round of the FA Cup, it left Liverpool with all their attention on the European Cup. First off, Finnish opposition were finished off 11-2 on aggregate before a certain Alex Ferguson was knocked from his Aberdeen perch 5-0 in the last 16, and a tricky CSKA Sofia quarter-final was comfortably traversed thanks in part to a bewildering Graham Souness hat-trick. All the while, Liverpool remained pristine away from home, McDermott winning the day up at Potodry, David Johnson performing similar duties in Bulgaria, so when Bayern Munich left Anfield with a 0-0 draw in the first leg of the semi-final, similar heroics were needed inside of the Olympia Stadion. And heroics is what they got.
Johnson, Kennedy is up, suddenly in space and onside and scores! Ray Kennedy has given Liverpool the lead, and they've done it! The away goal has counted! Ray Kennedy's goal has been enough to take Liverpool through to the European final.
Despite everything, the injuries to Alan Kennedy, Phil Thompson and Kenny Dalglish, the crumbling league form Liverpool were back in the European Cup final once again, and to win their 3rd continental crown, they would have to go up against the absolute best historically. The stage was set. Real Madrid, Paris. This time, the Reds had to thank the other Kennedy. They'd gone and done it again. Where next? Well, Mark Lawrenson was acquired for a club record 900 grand from Brighton, signed for a defence in another brutal move by Paisley. Alan Kennedy, who had just scored the European Cup final winning goal, was the man he was earmarked to be replacing. Only when the Irishman was moved into centre-half and Paisley rejigged his team did Kennedy get a look back in on the left. He wouldn't relinquish that chance and went on to play 205 consecutive games for the club thereafter. Other names through the door were Ronnie Whelan, Steve Nicol and Craig Johnston, whilst Grobbelaar made the number 1 jersey his own after Ray Clements was afforded his wish to move to Spurs that summer. Heartache followed shortly thereafter in September when Bill Shankly died just 7 years after his retirement. In the face of that adversity, Liverpool did him proud on the pitch. Spearing this offensive, Ian Rush, who had been angered by his European Cup final omission but was quickly told by Paisley to forget about it and become selfish in front of goal. He did, and he would reward Paisley with 62 goals in 100 matches over the next 2 seasons. As a result, Liverpool were insatiable in front of goal and won 13 and drew 3 of their final 16 league matches to pull the league title away from Bobby Robson's Ipswich Town. Unfortunately, outside of the League Cup, of course, honours wouldn't follow. Firstly, a Flamengo side fronted by Zico had the Reds' number in the Intercontinental Cup. Then, the slippery CSKA Sofia got their European Cup revenge in the quarter-final. Either way, Liverpool were just as good in claiming a second successive league title. A staggering 11 points from Watford, a deficit where Liverpool even had the chance to gain just 2 points from their final 7 matches in coasting to the title. There was no competition for Liverpool at home, but they couldn't crack Europe again under Paisley, bowing out to another Eastern European team in the quarter-final, courtesy of Vidzu Vuj. Bob Paisley was done, he had conquered every world. As he stepped back from Liverpool, he was keen to remind them of the work done before him, when he said, "Bill built the house, I just put the roof on." And I couldn't really put it any other way. Bill Shankly literally built the trophy room, of course with help from Paisley, both physically thanks to his expertise in bricklaying and in the form of football through his coaching. Paisley was the one to fill that trophy room. While Shankly was outgoing and gifted sound bites and quotes like sweets on Halloween, Paisley was the kind of man who declared that if he could walk down the street and nobody recognised him, he was delighted. The introverted Englishman knew his limitations, and it was those very limitations that were his reason for never taking on the England job despite being long coveted for the role and for comfortably being the most qualified out of his contemporaries. Paisley knew the England manager had to be a diplomat, a politician even, and he knew he could never be that despite the resounding success he had at club level. With the passing of time, history tends to paint Bob Paisley as a guy who simply just came in and continued the work of Bill Shankly and won the big one, which should have been reserved for his predecessor. However, let's not forget that Bob Paisley built 2 teams himself in such quick succession and was the biggest reason why that trophy room got so full so fast. While Shankly divvied about creating another team in the late 60s, Paisley was quicker to kill his darlings and transition his team into another way. Of the 1978 team that won the European Cup for the second successive year, only Phil Neal, Alan Hansen, Graham Souness and Kenny Dalglish remained in the squad for the 1983 League Cup final triumph, Paisley's last cup success. Despite the absence of an FA Cup, there was nothing really for Bob Paisley to do. He'd won the league title time and again, and his exploits in Europe didn't get eclipsed until 2022 with Carlo Ancelotti. At this time, Liverpool got fair warning over his retirement when he secretly arranged a deal with his assistant Joe Fagan in December '82 that the boot room lineage should continue into the 1983-84 campaign with him. And for his successor, he got into the groove of a League Cup triumph over Everton that prompted another wave of success. Even if Fagan did last just 2 years in the job, he took Liverpool to the European Cup final in both seasons, claimed the league title in his first campaign and added a 4th European crown to the club's illustrious history on the continent. And whilst it can't be categorised as the treble, Fagan was the only Liverpool manager to win a treble that featured the European Cup after winning on penalties in a hostile Rome against their hosts, which supplemented the winning of the League and League Cup in '84. Sadly, Fagan's time would be diminished by the Heysel disaster and the 1985 European Cup final, which was an ill-fitting end to his time at Liverpool. That put the end to an era decisively at Anfield. No longer could they go out to the continent and continue to dominate, which is probably what would have happened had a Kenny Dalglish-led Liverpool side been given half a chance. To learn more about his version of Liverpool, click on this.